Hello everyone, so this is Rashane, and I'm back at it again with another video on the medical school application process, well specifically my medical school application process. Thank you to everyone who has tuned into my previous videos and has provided me with inspiration and just has pushed me to continue to make more videos. This is something that is I've thought about doing for a long time, but at the same time, your application materials are so personal that it makes it kind of hard to want to do that. So, oh, my camera's moving. Hope it doesn't fall. Okay, let me fix this. So yeah, today I'll be going over my medical school application process, well specifically the schools that I applied to, and I will also be revealing what medical school I'll be attending, or that I'm currently attending. I'm currently already in school. It's been 3 months, so the last time I posted a video was a while ago, but people keep telling me that are asking me more about my process, and I decided that I'll just make another video and release it there. So in this video, I'll be going over my schools and telling you where I'm going to school, and then I'll read a secondary from one of the schools I was accepted to. And depending on how much time I have, I might read a second one. Okay, so now let me start. As you can see from my screen, this year I applied to a total of, I think, 32 medical schools. And so the most important thing you have to realize when you're going through this med school process, especially if you're someone like me who had like a balanced app, but at the same time wasn't like the most, there's going to be people who are more competitive than you, and there's also going to be people who are less competitive than you. So a way I wanted to balance this out was just by applying to a wide array of different schools. And the WAMC actually has a very good tool that you can use to look at different schools and see the profile of the entering class or the previous classes of a specific medical school. So I use that tool a lot and look for schools that I found said they were holistic, or that they might have had applicants that had a certain minimal MCAT, or versus just like focusing on what the average MCAT was or the average GPA was. I wanted to find schools that had like a bit of diversity in that, so I didn't only apply to schools that had like 520s and above. I also didn't only apply to schools that had like lower MCAT scores or lower GPA scores. So for me, I'm a New York resident, and I went to school in Rhode Island, so that already like had put in my mind that there were certain schools that I was planning to apply to and certain schools that I was not. For example, I love Brown, but I realized that I wanted to experience more of America or more of the world and not spend an additional 4 years in Rhode Island. So I ended up not applying to Brown's medical school. So the MCAS app opens to be submitted on, I think, early May, maybe May 1st. I don't remember exactly when. It's been so long at this point. But like I said in my previous video, which you should go watch, I submitted my application on May 30th, so it was the last day of May, and it was processed within basically like a little bit over 2 weeks. So that like lets you know that you should submit your application very early, because you want to make sure that your application, maybe you don't want it to be at the top of the pile, but you want it to be somewhere close to there. So for me, I submitted, and then I was processed within 2 weeks. And how I organized myself in terms of like schools I was applying to, it was kind of hard, not going to lie to you, because there's a lot of medical schools, but I kind of just like decided that I wanted to mostly apply to Northeast schools and a couple schools in elsewhere. So I applied to 2 schools in California. I applied to the zero. I have reasons for that. I applied to Charles R. Drew, which is an HBCU med school. So if you're Black, person of color, should definitely look into the HBCU med schools. There's Charles R. Drew, there's Howard, there's Morehouse, and Meharry Medical College. So I ended up applying to 3 of them. I applied to Charles R. Drew, I applied to Howard, and I applied to Morehouse. And I received interviews for all 3 of those. But I also applied to Stanford, I applied to Yale, I applied to Quinnipiac, I applied to, I said Howard already, but something you should know is if you do have an WAMC waiver, you will not receive a fee waived to submit to Howard supplementary, versus like all their schools for the most part gave me a fee waiver for that, because I had the WAMC fee assistance program. Then I also applied to George Washington. I applied to Morehouse, Emory, the University of Chicago. School means a lot to me. Loyola University of Chicago, the University of Illinois College of Medicine. As you can tell, I really, really liked Illinois and the Chicago area, Northwestern, Rush. And if you've seen my previous video, I did a pre-med internship program at Northwestern. So I really, really, really knew I liked the Chicago area and was like okay with possibly going to medical school there and starting a whole new life there. So I applied to a lot of schools there. I knew I didn't really want to go to Boston, so I didn't apply to too many Boston schools, but I did apply to BU and Tufts because they seemed like they had missions that aligned with mine. And I also wanted to work with like populations that are more diverse, not just rich white people or white people or only Asian people or only black people. I wanted to be somewhere where there's like a diverse, where basically they have access to a hospital with diverse patients. I also applied to Duke. I applied to Rutgers, New Jersey Medical College. I applied to Weill Cornell. I applied to Albert Einstein, SUNY Downstate, SUNY Upstate. I also applied to Stony Brook. Applied to Albany Medical College. I said Upstate already. I applied to NYU Grossman, which is the one in Manhattan. But I also applied to their Long Island campus, which is an accelerated. I think both schools might be accelerated, but Long Island had like an accelerated program into a residency. And I also applied to Columbia. Applied to Icon or Mount Sinai, applied to New York Medical College, applied to Temple, Drexel, and Sidney Kimmel Medical College. And so, as you can see, yeah, I applied to a wide range of schools over the 32 schools I applied to. There's some schools that are more competitive and some schools that are less competitive, but the thing about it is you never really know where you will stand or what a school will be looking for. So you just have to like cast a very wide net if you're a person like me who just wants to like get into the best medical school possible for them. And so now, to get a little bit more out, I received secondaries for all the schools I applied to, except for one. Oh, I might have actually, let me add this part. These are schools I didn't apply to. I did apply to Carle, Illinois College of Medicine, but I was like instantly rejected almost as soon as I submitted to secondary because you have to take 3 math classes, and I only took, no, you have to take an advanced math class beyond Calc 2. And Calc 2 was already as advanced enough for me, so I was going to take like multivariable calculus or linear algebra or anything like that. So I have them in the section called the grave. These are also just some other schools I thought about applying to, but I ended up not. Because I wasn't going to pay too much extra money too. Sorry about that noise in the background. So in terms of how my cycle went, so as I said, I got some secondaries to all of the schools, and let's filter that to see when I got it. So I got my first secondary pretty early, honestly. I got it. My first secondary was from, and I also always tried to have my secondary submitted within like 2 weeks of receiving them or within a week of receiving them. So I did pre-write most of my secondaries, but also once you start to write them, you start to have like a grasp of what you want to say each time, and you just kind of get very good at it. So as you can see, I received the one from Albany first, and then I ended up submitting that by July 2nd. And then I got invited to an interview on August the 22nd. So like within a month and a half-ish or 2 months-ish, I was able to like receive an interview from like pretty good school. And then I also received my application secondary from NYU on that same day, submitted it within a week also. Same thing for Albert Einstein. Once you start receiving them, they start like backing up really quickly. Like as you can see here, I got Einstein, Sidney Kimmel, U Chicago, and Tufts all in one day. And if you're not pre-written, you might end up in this position where I had them pre-written for Tufts, and I think they had very different than the rest of them. So it just was like a little bit too. I think I could have like done a better job about turning that in sooner, but I didn't. But then you also like start to get, as you can see, I get these on the 29th, but by July 1st, I'm also receiving like additional ones received from all these schools here. And then by the last secondary I think I received, so basically I received all my secondaries within like 2 weeks of each other, from between the between June 28th to July 18th, I received basically all the supplements that I received. And then there's some slower ones, like I received Rutgers the 19th, received Loyola the 24th, and I received Morehouse the 31st. And I remember thinking like, Morehouse really don't want me. Like all these other schools have sent me one, and like I don't get Morehouse like until like a week later from like the last one I got, which was already like a bit late. But anyway, I still try to always hand in or submit them immediately, like within a week, like I said before. Now, in terms of like schools that I received interviews from, so I did receive a lot of interviews. Basically, from all the schools I applied to, my interview, I received almost 42% of an interview from 42% of them. So I received 13 out of 32 interview invites from the ones that I submitted secondaries to. So my first interview invite was from the University of Chicago, and that's why that school was like also so dear to my heart, because my interview was just like really great, and I remember going through and just like thinking, wow, like I could really see myself at this school, and like I really connected with my interviewers. So it was just like overall a great experience, and having a school that's like a top school, a top medical school, immediately like offer you an interview invite so soon in the cycle, because I received an invite on August the 2nd, it just kind of like made you realize that, wait, this is actually really happening, and I have the chance to do something great with this cycle. So after Chicago, I think my next one that I received was Charles R. Drew, but I ended up not taking that interview because my interest basically like lowered, not because I had gotten an invite to Charles R. Drew to Chicago or anything or other schools, but just because I found it a little bit unprofessional. I had originally scheduled my interview for like within 2 weeks after, and their portal to do that, they didn't even have a portal to do that. You had to email somebody and tell them what school, when you were available to take that interview, and then after doing that, they assigned me a date, and then that date ended up being moved twice. So after the second time that my date was moved, I basically just emailed them and was like, hey, I'm not interested anymore, and you can like remove my application, because it just seemed like the school that they wouldn't be supportive. And knowing myself as like a low income immigrant who's also a black man, going into medicine, I need support, and if you're not being supportive during the transition process or the application process, I know that you're not going to be supportive when I'm actually a student there. So that was my 2 cents on that. This is up here, but it should be lower because it says that I received that in October 1st for University of UIC. So I also received an interview from Albany. My interview for that, I think of all my interviews, it was probably one of the like coolest experiences, because I think we did the one where you had seven. So there's like, I'm blanking on this, so I should probably have like reviewed this a little bit, but basically there's like regular behavioral interviews, and then there's like situational based interviews. I forgot what the specific word that they use for that is. Basically, like they provide you with a case, and you get like a second or two to think about it, and then, or like a minute or two to think about it, and then you just talk about it with the person. And I remember one of my cases was on being given $1 million and what you would do with that. Basically, like given $1 million to invest in anything health wise. And like immediately, like within a second, I knew what I was going to talk about. I talked about wanting to build a healthcare foundation in the Caribbean, which is something that I will do one day. Yeah, so that was a great interview. And then my Boston College interview was also really great. I remember my interviewer, I think I only had one interviewer, she just was raving about my application and how like she truly enjoyed reading it, and how like not only did she enjoy reading it, but she even showed it to like her husband, who also enjoyed reading it. And she was just telling me how like my personal let me fix the camera again, how my personal statement was just like inspiring, and how my application definitely had like a strong voice. And that made me very, very happy, because that interview was also like pretty early in the cycle too, and having an interviewer like rave about your application in that way made me realize that like a goal of mine, which was to have a strong voice in my application, was achieved. So there's that. I also received an interview invite to Albert Einstein. I thought my interview was like really, really good. It was a little bit research heavy, and I like talking about my research because I did it. So the interviewer like really, really asked me a lot of questions about it, and I just kind of I wasn't expecting it, but I was prepared for it. But I have a nemesis there, so I didn't really want to go to that school anyway. Then there is SUNY Upstate, and that one by then I had already done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 interviews, and I felt like of the 5 interviews, I would rather go to like any of those school or 4 interviews because I didn't do one for Drew. I realized that like I would rather go to those schools than SUNY Upstate. And I had also like received some additional interview invites from other schools that I was more interested in. So I decided to not waste their time and just like withdraw myself from there. So I didn't end up doing that interview. Um, then I received an invite from Howard, which was nice. And yeah, so my interview for Howard was also like very specific, where it wasn't anything bad necessarily between the interviewer or people. It was just the way that they spoke about the program and financing the program. It made me realize that like in order to go to Howard, I would probably be taking on a great amount of debt, and the students just didn't make it seem like the medical school was a place that like they felt very supportive all the time, and it seemed like they had to do a lot of like reaching out and advocating for themselves versus like I wanted a especially like coming from like an Ivy League school, Brown, where you have resource galore, where they're basically like you want it, you got it. I wanted a school that was going to have that type of energy, and Howard was not that. But I was happy to have been invited for an interview. Um, then I also interviewed at SUNY Downstate. My interview for there was like very late in the cycle. I got an early invite, but I don't think I did my interview until like after Christmas, so after the New Year, which was very weird to me because I basically had to schedule my interview like 3 months in advance or maybe even 4 months in advance, and then they just weren't very good at communicating. So there was that. Then I also received an interview invite from Stony Brook, which was great. I think the interviewer, he really read my application and kind of really knew what my interests were, and I also think that whoever was on the application committee who set up the interviews personally like made that person interview me because he was like the head of the urology department, and that's something that I'm very interested in. So it was very nice to like have like immediate access to like probably the highest you can get within the department, and just like him being like excited about me and also me being excited to speak with him. He did mention that like for what I'm interested in with more community or more Caribbean community related urological studies, Stony Brook wasn't necessarily the best place for that, knowing like the population out there. But I did enjoy talking to him, and then he did also mention that like they did do a lot of work with SUNY Downstate to like bridge that gap of studying more of an ethnic population. So I found that very interesting, and it just felt very like they were trying to recruit me. And I think in a way a lot of these interviews start to feel like that, like, and it just kind of like builds your confidence along the way too. Then I also received an invite from Morehouse, but again, I think the Howard experience and the Charles R. Drew experience kind of like it left a bad taste in my mouth when I thought about like going to an HBCU med school, even though I would have loved for my classmates to be more to look like me, you know, and no one else more than Howard and Morehouse and Mahiri and Charles R. Drew puts out more black doctors than, yeah, no one else does that, puts out more black doctors. So it was kind of like sad that I kind of like didn't really have the best experience with the process with them. But yeah, so I decided that because I knew I wasn't going to go to Morehouse, and I think by then I had received, by when my interview was supposed to be, I had received an acceptance. I decided that I was just going to withdraw it, and I did. And then, funny enough, the 2 last schools that I received interview invites from, I wasn't even necessarily thinking about them anymore. It was Weill Cornell, which is in Manhattan, and then Loyola University of Chicago, which is in Chicago. And my interview day for Cornell was very specific. I found that the school it immediately like felt very elitist, and it was very different than any of the other interviews that I had, and it was just very kind of reminded me of undergrad, very Ivy League, very full of themselves. But at the same time, like if I was Cornell, I'd be too. Versus my interview at Loyola was very fun. I remember I had like a faculty interviewer and then an interview from an M4 who was applying into cardiothoracic surgery, and I really had a good time speaking with the M4 because you just kind of like see how like much they enjoy the school and enjoy their life, and you kind of like can sense that yourself, that like, okay, I could see myself in this person's shoes. And then he asked me a really great question. He was like, what's the most unethical thing you've ever done? And I won't say what I said, but we laughed about it, and it was like I didn't expect this question, and I never got like a similar question on the whole interview trail to like get that there. So I was like, you're so funny, and just yeah, it made me like love it. I think out of all my interviews, between my favorites are either U Chicago and Loyola, and then more specifically on the Cornell interview, basically like everybody there was, I was the only black person in the room, and this was like also a very common occurrence at like most interviews, which were on Zoom. I would be like the only black person there. I think along the trail I saw maybe 2 or 3 other black people, apart from like Howard, where the room was like 50% black or maybe even 75% black. But yeah, it was just very very awkward. And then they did this session where it was like, oh, popcorn, well, say where you went to college and popcorn to the next person. No, say where you went to college, what your major was, and popcorn to the next person. And being the only black person in the room, knowing that they were doing the popcorning, it immediately made me very uncomfortable because I had a feeling I'd be the last one called on. And then I was the last one called on. And so like everybody in the room was just like, oh, I went to Harvard, I went to Brown, I went to Yale, I went to MIT, I went to blah blah blah. And it was just very elitist. And then being the only black person in the room, being the last one called on, I did go to like a prestigious school, so like I wasn't embarrassed to say anything like that. But I'm just like, if you do that, it like kind of sets up, you're basically like setting people up to like feel bad about themselves, and I did not like that at all. So yeah, and then in terms of schools that never gave me, never replied to me apart from giving me a rejection like months later, here they are, NYU, all these schools, yeah, respectfully fuck them. But yeah, and so now the moment you're probably all waiting for, of the schools that I did interview at, let me hide my thoughts. Oh shoot. So at the schools that I did interview for, okay, now for the part that you've all been waiting for, to probably find out where I'm going to med school, but also see the schools that I did get into. If you want to know more about my stats, you know where to find them. Of the schools I ended up interviewing at, I got into 61%, well, basically 62% of them. And if you like remove the ones that I didn't do an interview for, it's even crazier. So I ended up getting accepted to U Chicago, which was actually the first school I got into, and they called me. And I remember I was at work, and I worked in a toxicology lab where I worked with urine. And I remember like after hearing, I started screaming and like rolling on the floor, and then got up and finished my QPCR. Yeah. Then I also got into UIC. I withdrew from Charles R. Drew. I got into Albany. Wait, let me just reorder it. Yeah, so I ended up getting to most of the schools I applied to, or that I got an interview for. I got into Albany, Howard, SUNY Downstate, Stony Brook, Weill Cornell, and Loyola. And then I was rejected from Albert Einstein, which I think was the only school I applied to that rejected me like full on out. Where else was I? I think I was waitlisted at Boston University. It was the only school that I got waitlisted at, and I remember feeling a little bit salty about that because they were basically like, would you like to join this list? But then by then I'd already gotten into like 3 schools, and I was like, you literally told me I was like your favorite application. And so that made me think about like, oh, I wonder like how much percentage your interview matters versus like how much because I know for a fact my interview was like bomb, like amazing, versus like how much like the committee and your like SAT score, not SAT, your MCAT scores and stuff like that matter. So there's that. So basically then, since I didn't do 1, 2, 3, I didn't take 3 of my interviews, and then I did 10 interviews, and I got into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 schools. Wait, something is not right. I basically got into 8 out of 10, which is like an 80%, which is like pretty insane hit rate. If you had told me that that would be my hit rate in the end, I would have never guessed that. Like in terms of just schools I get interviews from, like getting 13 interview invites was like crazy, but also like walking away with 8 acceptances was even crazier, and like 1 wait list, and having like the only school I got fully rejected from that I interviewed at was Albert Einstein, which is funny because they're supposed to love poor people because they got poor people money now, but there's that. Yeah, and so now the moment you're probably all waiting for, where am I going to med school? All right, I'm gonna walk away. And And the moment you've been all waiting for, where is Rashane going to med school? I'm sure most of you already know, but I'm an M1 here at Weill Cornell. Yeah. If you had told me that Cornell over UChicago, I would have never believed you. But it just lets you know how the like application cycle works out. Like in the end, you just have to like pick the best school for you and the best school to like push your medical education where you want it to be. And for me, I didn't want to like have to take out too many loans, and Cornell had a debt-free program versus UChicago. I would have had to take out around $30K in loans each year, even though they did give me a full tuition scholarship. With the cost of living and just moving to Chicago from New York, it would have been a lot more expensive. And versus Cornell, I ended up taking a loan, but like that loan was for personal reasons versus like UChicago would have been a lot larger. So happy about that. I think both schools offered me a lot of the like same kind of programs. UChicago is a lot more diverse, where 50% of their school is Black or Hispanic, versus at Cornell, it's not very diverse. Well, we're kind of diverse, but not diverse in the ways that like you would think. There's only, out of a class of 106, there's only 6.5 Black people, and I think 7 Hispanic people. And in the classes above us, the numbers are worse, where I think in the M3s there's only 1 Black man and no Black woman. So there's that, and it definitely did play a big part in like me not wanting to initially come here. But I think going to second look and getting to meet some of my classmates and people who, even if they weren't necessarily Black or Hispanic, it kind of like made me realize that like this is a great school, and also like that I can gain a lot from that New York Presbyterian Cornell education system, because and being in the upper east side. So now I'm going to take a second and read a couple of my secondaries. So I'm very, very organized. I think for me, this document by the end ended up being 133 pages, but the reason for that is I didn't want to lose anything, and I didn't. So here's that. So before each interview, I would always just come back and read over my secondaries, and then at the top write like a couple things that like I can talk about or ask about during the interview. And here are mine. So this first question is basically asking me to like talk about like personal and professional experience that like have prepared you to be a UChicago med student. And so I start, as a Black low-income immigrant, I frequently visited understaffed clinics offering reduced pricing for undocumented patients not receiving my green card until I was 15. My doctor's visits often involved doctors who prioritized efficiency over thoroughness, leading to gaps in care. Once, I received 7 vaccinations in one day. While this saved my parents from having to another visit and taking time off from work, I returned to school with numb arms, unable to stay awake. This experience shaped my understanding of medicine in America until I matriculated to Brown University and received private insurance. Only then did I see a physician who took the time to understand my background and the factors impacting my health. Having experienced the limitations of medicine for the under-resourced, I hope to ensure that patients and children like myself receive comprehensive and compassionate care. In undergrad, I took courses in public health, biology, to Africana studies, providing a comprehensive understanding of health disparities affecting marginalized populations. As Caribbean immigrants, we often experience worse social determinants of health after migrating to the U.S. I will use my personal and educational background to serve as a catalyst for change. My interdisciplinary education equips me with the knowledge and the perspective needed to address these disparities effectively and advocate for improved health outcomes in underserved communities. As a pre-med intern at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, I was exposed to the diverse possibilities in medicine through the specialty rotation program. I shadowed the surgery, primary care, and neurosurgery departments. My favorite part was working with Dr. Haley Silver, a urologist, in her clinic. In her clinic, I observed vasectomies and cystoscopies, with the highlight being her performing a green light procedure. This minimally invasive procedure resembled a video game as Dr. Silver gently penetrated the urethra and used her laser to destroy a kidney stone. This experience highlighted the dynamic nature of urology, combining primary care with surgical interventions in diverse clinical settings. While I am not yet certain of what kind of physician I will become, my NM experience excites me for the challenges and rewards I will encounter in medicine. Similar to NM, the Pritzker School of Medicine, located in Chicago, plays a crucial role in maintaining the health of the merits of people. I am drawn to Pritzker because of its commitment to training physicians equipped to handle complex situations and people. Living in New York, I witnessed the challenges migrants face in accessing healthcare. Many avoid seeking care due to fears of deportation, lack of health insurance, or the feeling of not being heard. The training provided by Pritzker will equip me with the skills and knowledge necessary to become a physician dedicated to reducing social inequities in healthcare, both in America and globally. So I really enjoyed writing that and just like getting to talk about myself and stuff I like. And then this next one asked, please describe your research interest and share how your research opportunities will help you advance your career. And I said, as an aspiring medical student at Pritzker School of Medicine, I'm interested in the basic transitional sciences track. During my undergraduate studies, I had the opportunity to work as a research assistant at the Providence Institute of Oogenesis, primo under Professor Gary Wessel, exploring the process of pigmentation in sea urchins. The most exciting part of this project was working with RNA. On my first day, Gary taught me how to extract RNA from the spines of the sea urchins, and from there synthesize its cDNA. Despite being nervous due to the inherent instability of RNA, I was thrilled to learn such an advanced technique right from the start. My research at Primo, along with my role as a toxicology research technician at NJ Pain and Spine, has given me a strong foundation in molecular biology techniques such as liquid chromatography, mass spec, quantitative PCR, and tissue cell culturing. I have developed a deep appreciation for the meticulous nature of scientific inquiry, culminating in an honors thesis and a paper currently under peer review. This experience ignited a passion for understanding the molecular mechanisms underlying health processes and possibly uncovering novel disease treatments. At Pritzker, I aim to continue to develop my research skills to contribute to the scientific advancements that can translate into clinical applications. I am particularly interested in epigenetics, specifically RNA modifications. I'm inspired by the groundbreaking work of researchers like Professor Huan He, who has made significant discoveries in the field of RNA methylation. Understanding the role of RNA modifications in gene expression and their implications in various diseases could pave the way for new therapeutic strategies. Pritzker School of Medicine's longitudinal scholarship and discovery research program offers an ideal environment for pursuing my research interests. The program's protected curricular time, dedicated monitoring, and funding for scholarly pursuits will provide an ideal environment to pursue in-depth research and manage medical studies. I'm particularly excited about the opportunity to work with experienced faculty members who are leaders in their respective fields. Their guidance and mentorship will be invaluable as I pursue becoming a physician scientist. So yeah, I think this was like, as a person who didn't apply MD PhD but is interested in doing research, I was just happy that they asked this question so I could like geek out with them. And then this next one, it's kind of, this one is a little bit more sad, but it says, share with us a difficult or challenging situation where you have encountered and how you dealt with it. So I said, my journey into academic research began amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite the obstacles, I secured a research assistant position during my junior year. My PI mandated a thorough literature review before granting access to the lab. I persisted, eventually gaining clearance. Despite my enthusiasm for gaining wet lab research, the lab culture was individualistic and our PI had high expectations. Determined to excel, I worked tirelessly to master lab skills, only to receive demoralizing feedback. I received a Sprint Award to fund my summer research. Unfortunately, my aunt, battling breast cancer, became paralyzed and required constant care. I informed my PI that I would spend the first 4 weeks of summer caring for my aunt and then return to the lab, which she agreed to. My aunt passed away after my return. Struggling emotionally, I continued to work in the lab, hoping to demonstrate my commitment. When I asked for time off for the funeral, my PI coldly stated, "I can only spare you resources when I find you competent enough to do so." She emphasized the importance of pursuing results for grants and issued me an ultimatum regarding my place in the lab. I left this call devastated. This experience taught me the importance of self-respect despite harsh feedback. I reaffirmed my abilities and chose not to work in an unsupportive environment. After the funeral, I approached Professor Gary Wessel, expressing my goal of finding a new lab and completing an honors thesis. Gary commended my bravery for coming to his office and welcoming me into his Primo lab. Starting a new thesis in my senior year felt daunting, but amid emotional lows from mourning and recalling my ex-PI's remarks, I channeled that energy into science. Primo became a place where I excelled. Methodically planning each experiment, I grew more confident in myself. Ultimately, I completed an honors thesis, earning the nickname qPCR Wizard. This experience underscored the critical role of supportive environments that nurture potential. By prioritizing self-respect and seeking mutually respectful spaces, I navigated adversity, emerging stronger and ready to contribute meaningfully to the scientific community. So yeah, I kind of like did my best with that. And you know, that the thing about it is you can always just like fix other statements to match what you're thinking of. And yeah, let me stop that. And so now I think overall I've kind of like gone over my application and like what what schools I applied to, and in another video I went over like my full application. So I hope this video brings you joy. I hope it brings you inspiration and lets you know that you can do it too, and that like it's very breezy and hard on the other side, but it's harder on that side. And once you're in med school, you're in. You know, the hardest part about med school is getting in. So, and each time I always reminded myself, yo, no, you only need one. And so, do your thing. If you need any help, feel free to DM me on Instagram or send me an email. My email is dunrashane@gmail.com and my Instagram is rashane3. Yeah, and comment below, like, share, and subscribe. Wow.